Varus might be the hottest comp right now, but there are a bunch of different comps you could play, and we're going to cover all of those today in this video. And I also have a new section to the meta snapshot. I have this little thing over here where it says comps to one trick in case some people are interested in that type of playstyle, because people seem to really like the Faerie Kalista video that I did the other day. But in the S tier right now, dare I say it, this patch is actually pretty good in terms of balance. I think the Arcana Varus comp is by far the best comp, because it doesn't have any requirements and it's very powerful, but it's not completely bonkers to the point where 10 people are going for it every game. But in the S tier, right now I have Arcana Varus, Portal Ryze, and Faerie Kalista. Portal Ryze, obviously, if you get the Portal Spatula, it's absolutely bonkers. Faerie Kalista, it did get nerfed, but I think it's still very solid. If you get perfect items, and it's really easy to get perfect items because you only need 4 of them as opposed to 6 with other comps, you're pretty much good to go as long as you hit your units. But I find that a lot of the A tier comps are very, very playable, and we have a ton of them this week. So Zap Attack Blitzcrank, still very solid. Karma, Gwen, Fiora, I think these are the best 4 costs after Varus and Kalista. Witchcraft, Fiora, Karma, it's pretty much the same comp as the other one. Frost, Pyro, Olaf, this one's good. You do need an emblem, and you do have to compete for Varus, but there are different ways to kind of play Frost Pyro. Warrior, Katarina Reroll, pretty solid stuff. Any comp with Gwen and Fiora is going to do well, and if you add in a 3-star Katarina to the mix, that's obviously going to be more than solid. Ryze Flex is going to round out the 4 costs. Ryze, I find he is the weakest 4 cost right now. He's still playable, but I'd only play him if I got him for free, or if I'm forced to because everything else is too contested. Now onto some of the rarer comps, but very, very powerful. We have these 4 over here. Warwick Reroll, Spin to Win Wukong, Chrono Karma, Reroll Hecarim. These 4 comps are very, very strong if you hit everything. It's kind of like Exodia builds, but their requirements are so insane that you need to have a lot going for them. I'll get more into the stats and stuff later on these comps because it is pretty interesting to see. Ezreal did get nerfed, but the Blaster Ezreal build is still pretty good. Ziggs Reroll also got nerfed, but still playable. Pyro Varus, decent with +1 Pyro, but so many people are playing Arcana that I'd rather just play that than the Pyro version, unless I specifically get a Pyro emblem. Shapeshifter Flex, another Varus comp, again, same story. Unless I get tons of Shapeshifters, I'd rather go for a different style of Varus. Built Different is pretty playable. It's not the best thing ever. It's pretty mediocre, but if you have the right spot for it at the start of the game, it is takeable. Molten Caramel Rumble, decent hero augment, nothing crazy going on there. Multistriker Kalista and Horizontal Kalista. They're just 2 other ways to play Kalista, but again, I prefer the fairy version. But if you play one of these, they still work out pretty decently. Sugarcraft, I would only play with the +1 Sugarcraft, but it is playable now. And then Ashe Jax Reroll, if you get a ton of these at the beginning, very strong. And then Eldritch moved up to the A tier finally. It's a low A, but it's still an A, and you absolutely need Eldritch augments to make this work. In the B tier, this is where we have like a bit of a drop off. Reroll Veigar, still playable, but much weaker than it formerly was. Same with Kogmaw Reroll, Jinx Reroll, same thing. Akali Nyla is actually decent now because Akali did get a couple of buffs, but I feel like there are just much better things to go for right now. Fast Nining, same story, and yeah, pretty much the same for everything else here. They did buff up Pillar of Flame Shen. I brought it up from the C tier to the B tier, but if you go the whole patch without playing it, you're not missing out on anything. So with that in mind, let's get into how to play every single one of these comps this week. We're going to start off in the S tier. We have Arcana Varus. If you want to one trick, one comp and study up really hard, like go on the website bunnymuffins.lol to get every single bit of info you can there. So we have the 4 blaster version in case you hit Smolder, and then we have the regular version where you don't hit Smolder. They're pretty much the same comp. The top one you have Bard, and you only run 2 blaster with Varus and Rumble. And then you just play all the Arcana units, add in a Pyro, and that's all you really need to worry about. The items do get a little bit weird. You do want an Even Shroud or Last Whisper on your team. People do prefer the Even Shroud, so try to prioritize that. But one interesting thing people are doing are going double Infinity Edge Varus. So you don't have to do this, but it is probably the best build. Double Infinity Edge with either Shojin or Red Buff are probably the best 3 items on Varus right now. Alternatives to this is stuff like Deathblade, Giant Slayer, there's a whole list of them down here, but essentially you just want Varus to really pop people. After you itemize Tahm Kench and Varus, you could focus on your Xerath if you do manage to hit him, and Spear Shojin, Archangel Staff, Rabadon's Death Cap, Jeweled Gauntlet, like Adaptive Helm, any AP item or mana regeneration item works really well on Xerath. AP is by far his favorite stat. And then for Smolder, just build Rage Blades, Runons, Death Blades, Infinity Edge. Any attack damage or attack speed item works on Smolder, and that's going to be pretty much it for items. You could play the 4 Blaster version if you also get a +1 Blaster from an Augment and then just drop Ezreal. That's really strong too. But for augments, other stuff you can look for is like Arcana Crest, anything that helps you fast aid through econ augments such as Dual Purpose, Upward Mobility. Support Golem's really good because it adds a lot of tankiness to the team a lot of times. Slam In, Clear Mind, Cluttered Mind, any XP or econ augment is going to help you a ton just because it's a very expensive board, and there's a huge difference between having a Varus 2-star and a Varus 1-star because he either executes everything with the Pyro trait or he executes nothing. So just keep that in mind when you play this. You absolutely have to have as much gold as possible to almost guarantee getting a Varus 2 and then ideally getting some semblance of a frontline. But I don't know how long that description took. That's pretty much like the TLDR for the Varus comp. Also, if you ever do get +1 Blaster, you could also go for 6 Blaster. It's pretty much auto win if you have some 2-star tanks, and Xerath with Blaster is an absolute monster. But next comp up we have is going to be the Portal Ryze comp. We've played this a ton before. You absolutely need the Portal Spatula, and then you need a lot of rods to put on Ryze. Red buff is better than Morello, but they're both interchangeable. And then either Taric, Nasus, Morgana, or Diana are going to be your main tanks depending on who's 2-starred. In the super late game, if I ever get a Nora, I do like playing Nami as my extra unit because you get 3 mages and it allows Nora to carry a ton. But this comp is super easy to play. All you need is a portal emblem from either one of the augments, maybe some portal gives it to you, such as a spatula portal, or something like Wandering Trainers. And then after that, you just click all the portal units, level up, throw them in, get Ryze 2, get Taric 2. And I wouldn't say it's an auto win, but it's pretty close to it compared to other comps that you can play. But we played this comp a lot in the previous patches, so I'm going to skip through this one. Faerie Kalista is the next build here. I highly recommend you all watch the video over here if you want like a super in-depth tutorial on how to play Kalista. But essentially all you need is Rage Blades, a Stone Plate, and a health item, and some form of armor penetration. Oddly enough, if we check the data right now, Faerie is averaging a 4.28 in the current patch, and even though it got nerfed, in the previous patch, it was at a 4.29. So the overall placement hasn't really changed. The only thing that's changed after the nerf is the amount of players who play it. 5 Faerie used to have a 0.54 play rate, and now it has a 0.38. So it's much less contested, but the same power still exists. So that's why I still highly recommend this comp, still in the S tier. And since everyone's going for Varus, Kalista is wide open in a lot of cases. I think I watched one of my friends play and he got a 3-star Kalista because everyone was going for Karma comps, Varus comps, so all the 4 costs were taken and no one was buying Kalistas and he just got it for free. Not saying it's going to happen in your game, but it's a lot more open than it was last patch. If you ever do get a Faerie spat, going 7 Faerie is not a bad idea, but you could also just stick to 5. What you can do is play the 5 Faerie board, but then you drop Katarina, and then you add something like a Diana instead. Diana is pretty good because she is a Bastion and is a legendary, and you can put the Faerie spat on either Morgana or Diana. Doesn't really matter too much. Whoever's 2-star, that's who you put your items on. Morgana can also use any items. She could use AP items, she could use health items. But of course, you could also go 7 Faerie. I like going 7 Faerie if I have some sort of 2-star legendary that I could put the Faerie emblem on. So if I have like 2-star Morgana, that's really good. If not, I just drop down to 5, just so I don't have to play too many crappy Faerie units, such as like Tristana, Katarina, things like that. Let's move on into the next build. And again, watch this video over here. It's on the channel somewhere as well, if you want like a completely full in-depth tutorial on everything Kalista. But we're on to the A tier right now. A tier is still pretty solid. Not as good as the S tier, but there's so few comps in the S tier. And I'd say most of the S tier comps, they're mainly like S-, maybe an S. Nothing's really S+ right now. So the A tier is pretty close. And Zap Attack Blitzcrank, if you ever do get it, doing 5 Honeymancy with the Ziggs carry is very powerful still, even after the Ziggs nerf. Zap Attack, I think, is averaging a 4.3 right now. Yeah, 4.29. So it's a very solid hero augment still. Just make sure you have good items for Blitzcrank before you take it and a lot of copies. I wouldn't just blindly take it like you used to. If you don't want to play around Ziggs, Veigar works, Kogmaw works, so you can kind of flex the backline carry. But just do 1 cost reroll for this and then reroll for whatever other carry you're going for. I've also seen people do a fast 9 with Blitzcrank and they go for Xerath carry. So they use Blitzcrank to stabilize in stage 2, 3, and 4, and then ideally get a Xerath really quickly and use a Xerath carry. You do this if you get a 3-star Blitzcrank really quickly, and maybe you don't have too many copies of Ziggs. So then you're like, all right, screw it. I'm just gonna power level up because I got Blitzcrank 3-star for free, and let's go fast 9 instead. Items for Blitzcrank is pretty simple, just Stone Plate, random tank items, maybe like an Ionic Spark. A lot of people like Crown Guard too, but literally any tank item will do. Just slam items. Next up we have is Flex, Karma, Gwen, Fiora. There are 2 versions of this comp that I like to play. So the first one is the quote-unquote final version of the comp, where you have Morgana, Rakan, and all the preservers. But I find that the front line of this is quite weak. So before I get into that, I like playing with Nasus and Neeko instead. Getting a Nasus 2-star in stage 4 or 5 is more than enough to last until you get a Morgana 2-star to swap the items over to. And I really like this bottom version as sort of like a budget version of the build, because oftentimes I see like my friend playing, he's around like Diamond 2 right now, and he only goes for the top version where you play all the preservers, and then he gets an early Morgana, and then he like sells all his other tanks, plays 1-star Rakan, 1-star Morgana, and he wonders why he loses. And the reason why is because the front line just isn't strong enough. So I like stabilizing really hard with this comp with the Neeko Nasus combo. It's good because I still get Witchcraft for my Fiora, and then the best shapeshifter to pair with Neeko for tankiness is going to be Nasus. And when this comp really just needs tankiness so that Fiora and Gwen can do a little bit more damage before being targeted, it's really, really useful. A great thing about this build is that the items are actually pretty flexible. So apart from needing blue buff and anti-heal on Karma, such as red buff or Morello, Fiora and Gwen can use all sorts of different items, and building a Thieves Gloves on either of them, or even both of them, is more than sufficient. So essentially, if you get a lot of AP items after you build your Karma items, you could just build a Thieves Gloves for Fiora and then focus on your Gwen. If you get a lot of attack damage items, focus on your Fiora and Thieves Gloves your Gwen. If you get any tank items, throw them on Rakan or Nasus. And Fiora and Gwen can pretty much use any items. Like, the amount of items I could list for them are like way too long. But for example, for Fiora, she could use Hand of Justice, she could use Edge of Night, she could use Titan's Resolve, Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker, Quicksilver, Sterex, Bloodthirster, Infinity Edge. She could even use Last Whisper or Deathblade. It's not ideal, but it's usable. For Gwen, you could use Crown Guard, Hand of Justice, Edge of Night, Ionic Spark, Blue Buff, Rabadon's Death Cap, Titans, Thieves, Giant Slayer, Guard Breaker, Adaptive Helm, Quicksilver, Archangels, Nashor's Tooth, Bloodthirster, Jeweled Gauntlet, Hextech Gunblade. As you can see, there are a ton of options. So that's one big advantage of this comp. Another thing that's really useful is that you run a lot of 4-cost units in this bottom version over here. So it's really easy to just get something 2-star whenever you do a fast 8. It might not be exactly what you want, but when you're going for 5 different things, eventually like one of them is going to be 2-star. So you could just play around that unit instead. And it makes stabilizing a lot easier compared to other builds where you need exactly 1 or 2 4-cost units. But really good fast 8 build. I like this one a lot. In terms of like one-tricking, I find that this one might be the easiest to do, even though Arcana Varus might be a bit stronger, just because you have a lot of other options. Next build up we have is Witchcraft Fiora Karma. If you ever do get a Witchcraft emblem, you could go for like 6 Witchcraft or even stay at 4 Witchcraft, and you pretty much play the same type of units, except you play more of the Witchcrafts. If you ever get 2 Witchcraft emblems, 8 Witchcraft is very, very powerful, and it's pretty much an automatic top 2, if not a complete win. But just put Witchcraft emblem under Karma, she's one of the best appliers of it, and then focus on Fiora items after that. Next build up we have is going to be Frostfire, Olaf, and Varus. I'd pretty much only play this with the Frost emblem, and you want to go 7 Frost here. If you have Winter is Coming, this is also a very powerful comp, but you just go Nasus main tank, Varus main carry. Ironically, it's the Pyro units that are the carries in the Frost comp, but you put the Frost emblem on Varus and he gets very strong off of that. Olaf going to be a monster with any of the melee bruiser items. I also like running Even Shroud on him, just because it saves you the Last Whisper slot on your Varus. That way you could fit Spear Shojin and Infinity Edge on him with the Frost Emblem. But you could also put Even Shroud on your main tank, Nasus. Even Swain can use it. And then go 3 Bruiser items on Olaf. But it's hard to get that many items. Like 9 items is a lot in a lot of games, especially since you can also itemize Diana or even Hwei. So this comp definitely loves getting a ton of items through item augments. But Frost or Pyro +1s are very, very helpful for this comp. You could also do like the 5 Pyro build. And all in all, if you ever get one of the Frost augments at the start of the game, just take them and hard force this comp. You won't really regret it. Next build up we have is Katarina Reroll. Pretty solid comp if you do get to Katarina 3. If we look at the 3 cost right now, she's one of the better units. She's the second best 3-star, but her 3-star rate is so low. No one's really going for this because 1, all the Kalista players are taking the Katarinas, and 2, it's just really expensive to 3-cost reroll right now. Not a lot of players are doing it, so it's more difficult to hit the 3-star. But if you ever do get a 3-star Katarina, it is very, very, very powerful. Combine it with the other warriors, Fiora and Gwen. As you're rolling for Katarina on level 7, I often find myself hitting Fiora 2-star and Gwen 2-star pretty reliably. Add in a 4th warrior, it could be Akali, it could be Nyla or something like that. And then you can also go for 6 warrior if you ever get a +1 warrior emblem. The rest of the comp is just going to be pairing them up with preservers. Preservers are pretty good at just keeping them alive a little longer, but out of all the reroll comps, this is pretty viable. It's just a little bit difficult to get. I'd only play this in games where you have a ton of money or like a ton of Katarinas at the start. Next one up we have is the Ryze Flex build. Another solid 4-cost comp, but it is like a step below the other ones. There are 2 versions that are popular right now. It's the Preserver Scholar version and the Arcana version. Both of them are pretty similar. The main core is going to be Taric and Ryze. And then in the Preserver version, you just throw all the Preservers in there. In the Arcana version, you just throw all the Arcana units in. So pretty simple there. You just kind of flex between the 2, but of course, you need Ryze 2-star. The best items on Ryze is going to be red buff +2 ability power items. But Morello is fine in place of red buff. Rageblade's good. Some people even build Shojin. I don't like it that much, but sometimes you have to make it because swords are pretty dead in this comp. So unless you get a Reforger, you have to use a sword in some way, and Shojin and Giant Slayer are kind of the only ways to do that. But this is just like a standard fast 8 comp. Add Ryze and Taric to your team planner as you're rolling down. If you're getting more preservers, lean into preservers. If you're getting more Arcana units, lean more into Arcanas. Next build up we have is the Corrupted Vampiric Scepter Warwick. You know, I actually played a Warwick game without Corrupted Vampiric Scepter, and it was very, very good. It was this game over here. I had double Rageblade and Quicksilver on him. I had Big Gains as my augment at the start, Long Distance Pals. I think that's a great augment for Warwick because you really only care about him. And then I also had Immovable Object. Pretty much, I lost every round in stage 2 and 3. And even when I hit 3-star Warwick, I wasn't winning. But once I hit 6 Vanguard, I completely just demolished everyone. And I was pleasantly surprised because I pretty much started the game at 20 life because I lost all my early rounds. And I didn't really stack up any big gains because you gain health every takedowns you get. But I didn't get many takedowns, so it was kind of wasted. Warwick also gets stacks when he kills people, so that was pretty bad too. But eventually, once I hit 6 Vanguard, he was able to just mow through everything. The same thing happens when you hit 7 Frost. He just starts mowing through everything. But the comp is a lot better with the Corrupted Vampiric Scepter. I don't recommend playing it without it. The only reason why I went for it in my game was because I had a ton of Warwicks at the start, and I had big gains, so I was like, maybe he stacks, so I just wanted to do it for science. But the experiment did work out, but I wouldn't do it again. But pretty much the only unit you care about is Warwick, so for items, just throw like utility items on your other units. So you want like Protector's Vow on Tahm Kench to get him to cast faster, maybe like a Redemption, maybe an Even Shroud on someone, Sunfire Cape, and then focus on any way you can to make Warwick stronger through things like Radiant items, maybe an Ornn, maybe other Ornn items, combat augments. That's why I really like Long Distance Pals, because it only affects 2 units, and when you only care about 1 unit, it makes sense that it would be pretty decent in this comp. But follow 1-cost reroll for this build, and yeah, good luck. It's a pretty rare comp to hit, but when you do, it is well worth it. He's the best performing 1-cost right now as a 3-star, but people only play it situationally at this 21%. Look at this. He goes from like a 4.47 to a 3.16 with Vampiric Scepter. That's absolutely bonkers, right? There aren't that many items that change a unit that much. But next build up we have is Spin to Win Wukong. This build is back. they buffed spin to win, or they buffed some bug with Wukong. So it actually works now. Like, it wasn't working last patch, that's why it sucked last patch. But this is just typical Jinx Wukong reroll. A lot of people like throwing Preservers and 4 Hunter with him. Get a Stone Plate on him, a BT, and then a third item. On Jinx, Rageblade Runons is pretty typical. And then you just get Wukong 3-star, Jinx 3-star, and you should be winning a lot of rounds. But it's pretty hard to 3-star them because they're 3-cost units, but it's kind of the only way to play this build. Very, very powerful if you do hit. This augment's averaging like a 4.0 right now, which definitely is above average. Next one up we have is Chrono Karma. This one only works with Chrono Emblem, and you also need to hit a legendary unit in Camille. So it is a very high hit or miss comp. So if you like doing 1st or 8th, and you see Chrono Emblem at the start of the game, just go ahead and take it, hard force this after you take the augment, and pray you get Camille. That's really all there is to it. You want a fast 8, stabilize with Karma Rakan with 4 Chrono. If you get a 1-star Camille, great, you win the game. If not, try to get to level 9, roll for Camille there. And if you do get Chrono Emblem, try to put it on Morgana. She's really, really strong with it because she gets a ton of AP from the Chrono buff, and just throw a bunch of AP items on Morgana. Sometimes she farms you like 10 gold a round when she kills units. Next comp up we have is Hecarim Reroll. Absolutely disgusting comp. You can see right here, he's the best performing 3-star, 3-cost unit, and it's not even close. 3.17, second place is 3.48, but look at the 3-star rate, 3.35. The reason why is because everyone's playing Hecarim in Arcana builds, Multistriker builds, and there are a lot of those out there right now, so it's very hard to 3-star him. But if you do, it's kind of like winning the lottery. You just get a free first place. Instead of getting $400 million or whatever it is, you get 48 LP. So pretty fair trade. Just go 7 Multistrikers on him. And one thing people like to use a lot with this comp is the augment Unleash the Beast. Very, very powerful. I've seen some people hard force this comp. They get Unleash the Beast at the start of the game. They build 2 Sterix on him, and then they try to reroll for him 3-star. Unfortunately, they don't often hit him because everyone else is going for Hecarim, just as a strong unit in their comp. But if you do hit 3-star Hecarim with Unleash the Beast, you're probably going to win the game. We could actually check that out right now. Let's look at Hecarim, 3-star, augments, Unleash the Beast, 2.63. Like, that's absolutely bonkers nuts, right? But it doesn't really happen that often, so do keep that in mind. Next one up we have is Blaster Vanguard Reroll. This one's really fun with Ezreal 3-star as the main focus. If you ever do get Mordekaiser 3, he's another one of those really strong 3-cost units. But let's take a look at how Ezreal's doing compared to everyone else. He's kind of towards the lower middle half, 3.92. I don't really like playing 3-cost reroll when they're around like 3.9, 4.0. I much prefer like the 3.5s and below, or 3.75 and below. If we look at Veigar from a previous patch when he wasn't nerfed, like 3.75, that's more than fair. I'd go that comp pretty often, but now that he is 3.97, Ezreal's 3.92, that's territory where you're like, I don't really feel like going it that much. But in cases where you have a lot of gold and econ and you're going for blasters, let's say you're going for Varus and you have like Shojin IE, and you're also using Ezreal as your item holder in the mid game, and then all of a sudden you see like 2 more Ezreals in your shop and you haven't pre-leveled yet, you're level 7, sure, go for Ezreal 3-star. It's going to be a great build because a lot of people are using Varus right now. So if you can't hit Varus, you're pretty screwed, because again, the difference between Varus 1 and Varus 2 is like comparing the net worth of a billionaire versus Elon Musk. Elon Musk pretty much has like 100 times the net worth of like a random billionaire. So even though they are both billionaires, like the difference is astronomical between Varus 1 and Varus 2 is what I'm trying to say there. Normally the difference between 1 and 2-star 4 costs aren't really that big. Like Kalista, like yeah, 2-star Kalista is a lot better than 1-star Kalista, but you could still survive some games with 1-star Kalista. With 1-star Varus, you're not surviving anything. Like, it's really, really important to get Varus 2-star. So in games where you can't get him, going for an Ezreal 3 is a great backup, and that's how I would utilize this comp. Next one up, we have is Ziggs Reroll. Only play this if you have Zap Attack for Blitzcrank, or if you have +1 Honeymancy, or if you have a ton of Ziggs. That's the only time I would play this. because getting Ziggs 3 early and getting Ziggs 3 late, again, is the world of a difference, because Ziggs 2 and Ziggs 3, one of them kills everything in 2 shots, the other one takes 10 shots to kill them. So it's pretty hit or miss, and sometimes he gets the great snipe angles, sometimes he doesn't. And if you have the 3-star, it's a lot more forgiving if you miss. But I think this comp is super duper fun. I actually suck at this comp. I'm not really good at reroll. I'm much better at fast 8. But if you ever do get a lot of Ziggs in the early game, or if you get +1 Honeymancy, that's the only time that I would kind of try to go for this. It did get nerfed a bit. So if we look at 1-cost rerolls, it's at 4.24, which is actually pretty respectable. I'd say anything above like a 4.3, 4.4 for 1-cost 3-star is more than good enough, especially when the 3-star rate is so high. Look at this, 78%. That's pretty high. So it's pretty reliable. He's probably the best 1-cost reroll right now. Next comp up we have is going to be the Pyro Varus build. Only play this if you get +1 Pyro so that you could go for 5 Pyro. I like pairing it up with 4 Shapeshifters. You could also mix it in with Frost. If you get a bunch of 2-star Frost units, you can combine them really easily. Let's say you have like Twitch, Olaf, Hwei, and Diana. You go like 5 Frost, 5 Pyro. With some emblems, it will work, but a more reliable way to play it, I think, is just with the Shapeshifters. You just need a strong front line so that Varus eventually kills everything. And by the way, there is a bug with Last Whisper right now. It's supposed to, you know how Varus shoots his thing and then it explodes in a circle? Last Whisper is supposed to apply the armor debuff on the first instance of damage, but for some reason it doesn't. So your explosion damage does not hit reduce armor opponents. So you need to hit them twice in order to do that. And sometimes the buff falls off during that time frame. So that's why some people don't like building Last Whisper and they favor the Even Shroud a bit more. But once they fix the bug, Last Whisper is very good on Varus. And it's still useful even if it only applies to subsequent attacks, because he still needs it to kill the main tank. He needs to auto them down a bit. It's more so for the secondary targets that Last Whisper is missing out some value due to a bug. That's why data checking is very useful, because sometimes, you know, even if a bug exists, sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. If we check out Last Whisper on Varus, he's averaging a 4.37 right now, but Last Whisper is still a 4.31 even with the bug, so it's not a bad item, but I do want to let people know that there is a bug right now, but it's still more than playable. But for example, if we just add in an Even Shroud to like any champion, it's at a 4.01. So Even Shroud is a lot better than Last Whisper, but Last Whisper is still good. And this goes for all Varus comps right now, not just the Pyro Varus. Next build up we have is going to be Shapeshifter Flex. This is another Varus build, but you could also play around Smolder with it, because Varus is very contested right now. So if you ever get like a 1-star Smolder and and you have Shapeshifters at the start of the game, you could go for something like this. Very powerful stuff. 6 or 8 Shapeshifter work. I like playing this with either Eternal Growth, Big Gains, or Shapeshifter emblems at the start of the game, just because they really benefit from the additional health that those augments give. And then if you ever do hit Briar, throw all your items on her. Tank items go on Nasus, and then any attack damage items, any attack speed items go on Varus and Smolder. Very simple comp to play. If you do commit to this comp at the beginning of the game, let's say you picked Eternal Growth, which is one of the Shapeshifter augments, just go to your team planner, add in all the Shapeshifters, and play around Varus carry. Then later on switch to Smolder. You could use other carries in the meantime if you don't hit Varus. Any pair of blasters will do, for example. I'm sure you could even make Ryze work with Ryze and Zoe and put the Rage Blades on Ryze. You still get 3 Portal with the Jace, and you get Scholar from the Zoe. But eventually I do want to transition into a Smolder build. But pretty powerful comp, a bit more situational than all the other stuff, because it does rely on certain augments. Next one up we have is Build Different. You need the Build Different augment for this. It's okay. If we do the data check right now, it's going to be at a 4.6, which is playable still. Obviously, you want to be like 4.5 or above. Actually, what I love about this site is that it has the average placements of all games in whatever rating you're in, and the average isn't actually 4.5 sometimes. In this case, it's 4.46, so even a 4.5 is below average for this specific data set. Always check this whenever you're doing that type of analysis. But 4.6 is still playable. You just need to take it in good spots. I'm assuming people are taking it in bad spots, but Built Different is really good on econ portals because you want to fast 8 and play around the 4 costs. And it's also really good if you have a lot of random upgrades in the early game, and you could just play those upgraded units without synergizing them and win a lot of rounds in stage 2. Next one up we have is Molten Caramel Rumble. Solid comp. I would only play this if you have a lot of good items for Rumble, and maybe at least one additional Rumble to the one that you get. I do prefer 2-starring him, of course, after taking the augment, but we're not also lucky to do that. It's a very rare instance. But if you have one copy of Rumble and good items for him, such as a BT component and a rod, then I would go for this. If not, I would just re-roll the augment and go for something else instead, because items are very important on Rumble. I see a lot of people take this and then they don't have 3 items on Rumble, and it's just like, what are you doing, you know? That's kind of a waste. But I'm assuming they picked it because they had a lot of Rumbles at the start of the game, and they thought they would get the items later. But the items are super duper important because you can't really rely on other units to carry. Next one up we have is going to be Multistriker Kalista. Better Kalista builds out there, but if you have +1 Multistriker, very good comp to go for. If you can't re-roll Hecarim, Kassadin, Akali, Jax, Ashe, things like that. Then you just play around Kalista, and she kills a lot of stuff because she attacks so quickly from the 7+ Multistriker. Horizontal Kalista, also an interesting build. This one's just going to be 3 Faerie with 4 Preserver. People like combining it with either Gwen or Fiora as a secondary carry, so it works a little bit different than the 5 Faerie build where you're really just focused on tank items plus Kalista items. This one's more of warrior-esque plus a Rage Blade. It's a solid comp. There are better versions of it out there for Kalista, but sometimes the other builds are very contested for the other units, so you could go for this one, even though this one does share a lot of units with the 5 Faerie build. But if you get a free Gwen 2 or a free Fiora 2, you might as well try to play this, you know? Next one up we have is Sugarcraft. +1 Sugarcraft is the only time I'd play this. It's not that strong, but it is usable. But you absolutely need the Sugarcraft emblem, and you prefer to play it on a portal where you have additional items. So stuff like component anvils, where you start the game with 3 component anvils, is really good. The one where you get a item anvil is really good. The ones where you get Scuttle Puddle, Crab Rave, things like that. That's the only time I would play Sugarcraft with a +1 Sugarcraft emblem at stage 2-1. I would not play it otherwise because it's just not strong enough to kind of justify it. But if you meet all the conditions, it's a very solid comp. And you just play around Gwen Fiora, put the Sugarcraft emblem on your Fiora. Sometimes people get Jinx 3, sometimes they don't, and then you try to get the cash outs and win through the cash outs. Very strong stuff. Just make sure you slam all your items. You do get a golden remover later on in the game, which is an infinite use item remover, so don't be afraid to slam items because you could always move it to your perfect unit later on. Next one up we have is Ashe Jax Reroll. It's an okay comp. It's not as strong as it was before, but I'd say in lower ratings this comp is really good. If you don't believe me, let's look at the 1-cost rerolls over here. So Jax is 4.43 at 3-star, Ashe is 4.61. This is in Master Plus. If we go to, let's say, like Platinum, Ashe goes to 4.15, Jax goes to 3.98. So I read this Reddit post recently where people are like, oh, there's no such thing as beginner comps like there are beginner champions in League of Legends. Because in League of Legends, you play like Annie. It's like a very easy champ. And you'll climb, right? Compared to playing something like Yasuo, which is very difficult. But for some reason, this Reddit post I was looking at a while ago, it was like saying there's no strongest comp in low elo, there's only strong comps, but that's just a complete lie. And Ashe Jax Reroll is one of those examples. It's really good if you're trying to climb in lower ratings because it's really easy to play. And even though the cap of the board isn't that high compared to other stuff, like other people don't know how to play as well, so they can't make like a perfect Arcana Varus board, you know? So I definitely do recommend this comp, but just try to play it situationally because you do want a lot of Jaxes and Ashes before you play this. Next one up we have is the Eldritch build. I'm actually kind of excited about this because we haven't really played too much Eldritch. I tried it recently, I got 7th with it. I was doing Syndra reroll. I forgot if it was 7th or 8th actually. But I do see the potential because I did get contested. And I kind of hard forced it from the beginning of the game for science. I wasn't really picking it because I thought it was great at the time. But there are 2 options you have here. You could play the 3-star Syndra version, or you could play the Nami version. The 3-star Syndra version I would only do if you have Spear of Shojin early on in the game so that you could start stacking your Syndra. It works like the old Syndra from the past. and it's actually pretty solid. It's nothing crazy good, but it is pretty balanced. So if you get Eldritch Emblem or School Mascot at the start of the game, and you get a Syndra, and you get a Spirit Trojan, sure, go for this build. If not, let's say you get Eldritch Emblem, but no Syndra, no Spirit Trojan, you could go for the Nami version instead, which revolves around mages. You play 6 Eldritch units, you add in Galio and Nora, and then you add in the +1 with the emblem onto your Galio. That way you get to 7, and you also get 3 mages that way, and Nami should be able to carry some rounds. Eventually, you get Briar, throw some bruiser items on Briar, and she helps a lot too. But this build is really, really fun. You either do 2-cost reroll if you're going for Syndra, or standard leveling if you're going for Nami. But it's a pretty fun build, because the Volibear that comes out, or like the Eldritch thing that comes out, is fun to look at, you know? But only go for this with the emblem or School Mascot, and ideally you have a bunch of related units before you take the augment. But I would say this is one of the underrated builds of the patch, so definitely try this out if you have not already. Onto the B tier, we have Reroll Veigar, seen better days, still playable. I like going 5 mage with it, some people like going Honeymancy. But Veigar's actually bugged right now. If you build blue buff and Shojin on him, which are his best items, because he just casts so much that way, he starts the round with 0 mana for some reason when you build this. So I'm assuming when they fix this, he'll be more balanced. So I'm assuming when they fix this, he'll be better. What's interesting is that they buffed him, but he's at 3.97 right now. But last patch, he was at a 3.94. So he actually got worse after the buff, and I think it's related to that bug that we have with the blue buff plus Shojin. Next build up we have is going to be Kogmaw and Jinx Hunter reroll. Some people like doing this with 4 Hunter. That's probably like the most popular thing right now with Nunu. Sometimes people like playing Sweet Tooth with this. Pretty solid build overall, but Kogmaw's just seen better days, so I'd kind of avoid these comps for now, but it's still playable if you get a ton of them. Akali Nyla, you could transition this into one of the warrior builds that we saw before with the Fiora plus Gwen, but I find that it's expensive to get both 3-star Akali and Nyla with 2-star Fiora and Gwen without some crazy econ. But Akali does do work now. Before she sucked, but they buffed her quite a bit, so she's not as bad. Multistriker Kassadin, seen better days, probably would avoid this build for now. And Fast Nining, situational, Syndra Cassiopeia reroll. If people really want to play Syndra, like, do it, I guess. There are much better things to go for, but if you get a ton of them, like, you could try the Syndra Cassiopeia reroll with Shapeshifters. It's okay, nothing crazy. It's not horrible either, but you need all the pieces to fall into place in order for this to work. Deja Vu Galio, seen better days. Witchiwalla Poppy, yeah, like, we don't need to go through the rest of the B and C tier. They're not as good, and the A tiers and S tiers definitely are a step above. So all in all, like, if you want to just go full mental disorder, just like one trick one of these comps that I have highlighted over here, really master them, know all the ins and outs. But if you want to flex, there are a lot of A tier builds that are possible. Right now I am kind of flexing. I kind of want to hard force a comp for like a video to get to Challenger, but it gets a little boring for me. So right now I'm flexing. You're free to do whatever you want, but I do think one tricking probably is the best way to climb for a lot of people, just because it causes you to like make very few mistakes, even if you're playing suboptimally. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but essentially when you just hard force one comp, you really optimize one playstyle, and you just can never get super confused if you like go turbo flex. So that's why for like immediate short-term climbing, forcing one comp is always going to be the way to go. But for me, I think I'm going to focus on Varus and Kalista. I'm going to see what's going to be played a lot that day and go for the other one. And then if I happen to get a blue buff, I'll go for Karma. And that's pretty much going to be it. So let me know how you all are going to be approaching the patch. Let me know what you think about the tier list. And let me know what your plans are for patch 14.19. But that's going to be it for me today. I will be updating this tier list next week as well, as I do every single Friday. So do look out for that. If you want more information, go to bunnymuffins.lol/meta and teamfight.lol if you want to do all the stat checks like I did. But that's pretty much it for me. I'll see you all later.